I gave 5,000 hours of my life to Hillsong Church. I raised my hands in worship. I believed I had heard God's voice speaking to me personally, and I even spoke in tongues. And it wasn't until after I left that I was even able to ask myself the haunting question: was I in a cult? Hillsong became not just my community and my passion, but an integral part of my identity and purpose. I was in church-related activities 4 to 5 days a week. I was volunteering as if it was my full-time job. We would brag about how bad the Hillsong hangover would be on Monday. I grew volunteer teams. I started a Connect group. I even helped build a brand new church campus. While that time was far from healthy, and I'm glad I got out, there are also some really good things that were part of my Hillsong experience that I wish I could get back in some way. Welcome to Christy's Unreality. On this channel, we're exploring the gray area between fiction and reality. As you can probably tell, this particular episode is very personal for me. But this video isn't going to be just about my personal story being involved in Hillsong. It's more than that. My hope in sharing this story is that it will A, help you understand the good and justifiable reasons why people join high control groups. B, what makes them so resistant to seeing the truth. And C, if you stick around to the end, I'll share some things that might actually help them break free. Or maybe it's you that needs that encouragement. And yes, I do have political motivations here. The disinformation and lack of trust that I'm seeing run our country right now scares me. But the thing that scares me even more is the dismissiveness with which we treat people who believe differently than we do. And I'm delusional enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, my experience might help other people start more productive conversations. So first, why do people join cults? The thing I wish everyone would understand about megachurches and cults and other high control groups is that they are built on a foundation of promising to fulfill good basic human needs and desires, like community, acceptance, belonging, purpose. And they typically deliver, at least for a time. Hillsong did a really good job of being a one-stop shop for all of my personal and spiritual needs. I had a social activity to depend on pretty much any night of the week. I had a space to have deep and meaningful discussions with other believers. It made me feel like I wasn't just supporting a cause. It felt like I was serving an eternal cosmic purpose. A purpose that was aligned with the all-powerful God that created the universe, who loved me and had a personal plan to take care of me. And if I just tune myself to his plan, then I will receive his blessing. And even if I don't get those blessings here on earth, I will get them by living forever in heaven with him after I die. When you frame it like that, it's pretty easy to see why more people are Christians than are activists. How are grassroots activist groups who are trying to dismantle centuries worth of oppressive systems supposed to compete with that? If you are a Christian and an activist, thank you. I want to be clear that my deconstruction doesn't mean that I expect you to deconstruct. And I thank you for actually reading your Bible and standing up for the least of these as Jesus taught. When you join a high control group, you feel like you're becoming part of something bigger than yourself. And that is a good thing that can honestly be pretty hard to find outside of organized religion. The tactics that they are using to exploit their followers are often just distortions of the same healthy and beneficial patterns that are needed to build relationships and communities. And honestly, I hope that the people who are leading activist organizations and nonprofits for truly good humanitarian causes are as well informed on these principles as the people who are manipulating them for less than positive reasons. While we're on the topic of needing to use these techniques to grow, would you do me a small favor? Go ahead and click that like button. It is a free and easy way for you to support this channel and help more people see it. I would also love to hear in the comments below an example that you've seen of cultish influences being used in a positive way. Or maybe you, like me, have had it in a not so positive way, and I'd love to hear that story too. Now, the line where something crosses from being a good thing into being a cult is actually really hard to determine. I do plan to do another episode on specifically what was culty about Hillsong, but if you're trying to figure out if something is a cult or not, I would recommend looking at the BITE model, which is one of the more standard ways of defining cult behavior. And I would also recommend Amanda Montell's book Cultish, and also her podcast Sounds Like a Cult. On the podcast, they analyze any number of cultish groups and put them into one of three categories. Either a live your life, watch your back, or get the fuck out. I personally would put Hillsong somewhere between a watch your back or get the fuck out, and where it lies along that spectrum depends on how deeply you've gone in. I personally define Hillsong as a pseudo-cult, and the main thing that for me makes it not an actual cult is that they don't actively isolate you from outside influence. Although I spent so much time there that it kind of had the same effect. So now that we understand why people join, why do people stay? First of all, they might not even see the bad stuff because they are so entrenched in the narratives of that group. In my immersive theater work, I use a framework called SPICE to talk about the foundational elements that build a reality, fictional or not. And S stands for social reinforcement. And I think it is by far the most powerful. When you have surrounded yourself with people who believe a specific framing on reality, who believe specific stories, it is very hard to break out of it. It's really easy to think that the people who join cults are just dumb, but especially in these times of uncertainty and distrust, I believe that anyone is susceptible to cult influence. Let's try a thought experiment. Can you think of a time where you saw a post on social media, and because it aligned with your pre-existing belief, you believed it was true, and you didn't go fact check it, and then later you realized that that thing wasn't true? Now, hopefully you've learned from an experience like that how important it is to go and check sources. But usually you only learn that skill by falling into false beliefs or being taught by someone who has. But it's actually really easy to fall into that, especially when everyone around you is saying the same thing, including media persona that you have been taught to trust. As fanatical ideologies continue to grow in influence over our society, we cannot continue to simply dismiss these people as stupid or not doing their research. They might be ill-informed, but that does not mean that they are not seeking out information. There was a research study done where participants were put in a room with other people who were actors, but they thought they were just other participants. And when they were asked to answer a very obvious question, if the actors all gave the wrong answer, I think something like 60% of the time, the participant would go along with that wrong answer, even though it was pretty obvious that it was wrong. When you are immersed in a group of people who believes a certain thing, it feels like a threat to counter that belief system. In caveman days, when you lost your community, you're probably gonna die. Now, you're probably not gonna die, but there is so much research around how social support structures are necessary for not just emotional and mental well-being, but for our physical health. So once a belief system gets to that level, when you're met with conflicting information, instead of simply updating your beliefs, you find a reason to justify this thing that you've built your life on. Now, when I was a part of Hillsong, if someone said to me, God isn't real, why would I believe them instead of the thousands of people that I'm surrounded by every Sunday who claim to feel the presence of God? That sounds stupid. Sure, there's no physical evidence for God, but there is external evidence I can point to justify that interpretation and that story that I tell myself. But at the end of the day, it is a faith. So inherently, it's not actually about proof. And that is why facts and statistics do not work. Which brings me to, what does work. Now, my personal deconstruction was due to a lot of factors. I had just gotten out of a very manipulative, collaborative relationship. I was starting to recognize the hypocrisy at Hillsong, and it was 2016, and I just could not comprehend why people could interpret the same Bible that I had read for my entire life since the time I knew how to read to justify these political views that directly contradicted Jesus' teachings. I know plenty of Christians who stayed Christian while disagreeing with Trump supporters, but for me, it was the thread that unraveled my entire reality. If you have ever had the experience of deconstructing a foundational belief, I would love to hear in the comments what that belief was and what made you rethink it. To be honest, I'm still trying to figure out how to reconstruct my sense of self and reality after losing that. Confirmation bias is powerful, and there are always ways to justify pre-existing beliefs. The key for me was finding a different way to frame all of the experiences that I had previously used to justify my beliefs. And that came in the form of a book called You Are Not So Smart, which I plan to go more in depth on in a future episode. But the short version is it's a book about psychological fallacies, which are essentially mental shortcuts that have formed from generation upon generation of evolutionary psychology. And those mental shortcuts are absolutely vital for us to function in society, but they can also cause us to jump to false conclusions. And ironically, this book that is essentially calling everyone dumb allowed me to realize how I had come to these really major false conclusions without sacrificing my personal identity as an intelligent human. So it was really important for me to change my mind for myself in a way that maintained part of my identity and gave me a new structure to frame my past experiences that had previously supported my belief system. But I actually had this revelation while writing the script for this video that the main thing that made it possible for me to break free and walk away from this reality that I had known for my entire life, it wasn't the cognitive dissonance. I actually kept going to church even after I stopped believing, honestly, to kind of test God to see if he would give me any signs that I couldn't explain away by this book, but also because that's where my friends were. And another really significant part of me being able to step away from the church was that I left New York to be part of the interactive deep dive. And for that most pivotal moment in my deconstruction, I had another community to replace the gap that was left behind when I left my faith group. So when I think about these conversations that happen both on social media and in person, where people are just calling each other dumb, I can't help but think to myself, why the hell would someone leave their community to join a group of people who think they're an idiot? And they're not going to isolate themselves. If we treat people with opposing views with disdain and judgment, they're not going to feel safe leaving the community that agrees with them. Unfortunately, the only person who can change a mind is that person themselves. But with the right questions and the right support, you can help someone feel safe enough to deconstruct their previously held belief. The same author who wrote You Are Not So Smart released another book called How Minds Change that is all about the research behind that. And it gives me hope. I would highly recommend giving it a read. And if you're interested in more on that topic, go click that subscribe button and hit that bell icon because I will be sharing more about this in the future on this channel. And one of the hardest questions I've had to continue to ask myself after leaving Christianity is, where do I belong now? And I still haven't quite found the answer. As you can imagine, after leaving my faith, I am now quite skeptical. So most things with a spiritual bent feel a bit triggering, honestly. I simultaneously get really defensive at most things that feel wooey. But at the same time, I long for the way that the spiritual experiences felt. I'm sure there might be a community that is for me, but what I've tried so far just hasn't quite felt like a fit. And instead of waiting till I find the right community, I decided to start building one. Now, right now it is 2 members strong, but I hope as I continue to share my story that I will find the people who resonate. And if that's you, there's a link in the description below where you can sign up for the Making Believe newsletter and join our Discord community. The main thing that I have decided to offer as part of that community is what I'm calling holy shit focus rituals, which are virtual co-working sessions designed to help you work on the things that your soul wants, whatever that means for you. If you're familiar with Cave Day, kind of like that, but I included a bit of a ritual to get into a more creative headspace and added an emphasis on community building and accountability. It has taken me so long to actually start to build this because I am so afraid of becoming a cult myself, but I have to keep reminding myself of what I said at the beginning of this video, which is that I fell into a cult in the first place because there was a vital human need that was not being met. And there should be a way to fill that void that doesn't require you to buy into a God story. We all deserve more secular options to fulfill the basic needs of community and belonging. So if that sounds like something that you'd like to belong to, I'd love to see you in our community Discord. If you made it this far, you're probably my people. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you know when I'm posting a new video. And while you're there, go ahead and hit that like button because the more people that like it, the more YouTube shares it, and the more people will find this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the Making Believe community. And in the meantime, here are some other videos that you might like to watch next.